Hi, I'm Molly Saruwatari, and this is Climate to Action, a California State University San Marcos student podcast.
And my name is Alex. We're here to amplify voices, explore solutions to climate change, and address climate injustice for all living things.
Here with C2A, we are committed to providing a variety of perspectives for addressing the climate crisis in every episode. Stay tuned for the end of the episode where we provide a simple way you can take action yourself.
But first, we'd like to acknowledge that our recording studio is located on the traditional territory of the Luiseno Payamcoicham people.
CSUSM and its surrounding areas are still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pachanga, Rincon, and Saboba Luiseno Payamcoicham people.
It's also important to acknowledge that this land remains the shared space among the Cupeño, Kumeyaay, and Ipai peoples.
For today's episode, we are thrilled to introduce a very special guest, Ali Mariko Dressel. Ali is passionate about sustainability, marine conservation, and climate justice, and has applied her diverse skills from performance arts to community engagement in the fight against climate change.
Ali, we're excited to have you here today. Can you tell us more about your background? What inspired your journey in climate justice, marine conservation, and the arts?
Sure. So I grew up in New Mexico. I actually grew up in the desert, and I was very lucky to have, probably to this day, the only marine science teacher in the entire state of New Mexico. And he was incredibly inspirational. He actually inspired whole generations of students to pursue oceanography for their careers, myself included. And so that's what initially brought me to San Diego. So I went to the University of San Diego for my undergrad, and I did my degrees in both marine science and theater. And initially, I thought, yes, I want to pursue marine biology for sure. I had also done theater since I was a kid, so I was really into acting. I had done children's theater throughout. In high school, directed Dracula, which was a really awesome production, so I really enjoyed that. And I thought, yeah, I'll still dabble in it, and maybe minor in college or something. But then as I started to take classes, I realized that I really enjoyed theater a lot still. So I thought, you know what, I actually like this too much. I would like to double major. And so that's how the two sort of started. And in doing so, I actually started to see the connections between the two. So in marine science, as we were learning more about what's happening to our oceans and with climate change and all these things, I wanted to pursue conservation because that seemed to be the main direction that we all need to go, and also climate action. At the same time as I was studying theater has always been a force for social good and for social change, So theater has always been a force for social change. So it has always helped to deconstruct and reconstruct social norms. So you think about the media, think about Hollywood and its impact and its influence on culture and cultural norms. And so this is what got me thinking, hey, why don't we combine these two and use theater, especially at the time I was really interested in interactive, and this is before immersive was even the buzzword, but immersive forms of engagement as a way to really create these powerful, impactful, and potentially life-changing experiences. And why not use those kinds of experiences to connect people to oceans, to ocean conservation, to climate action, to all of the communications that we need, but do it in a way that's very innovative and very impactful and memorable and hopefully life-changing.
That's so amazing. And shout out to that teacher in New Mexico who inspired you to go into marine conservation. And it's crazy because I also did theater in high school. And so when I got to college, I was so like, oh my gosh, do I go into theater? Because I love it. And you're so right about it breaking down like social norms, because it truly just allows you to kind of be who you want to be and allow you to be the person who you've always strived to be. Your work bridges the worlds of marine science and performance art. How did these worlds meet for you? Oh, well, I guess you kind of just answered that a little bit.
Sure, I can expand.
Yes.
It goes on. So I graduated a while back now. So after I graduated with 2 degrees in I did what everyone does with 2 degrees and immediately joined the circus. So, but for real, I actually joined the circus. I became a professional clown. And this was with like more of a French style circus. So we did the full face paint, and I learned a lot of acrobatics and physical theater, physical movement type of work in a French kind of style. And so I worked with a particular circus group, and we traveled all over, did lots of shows around California and the US, and then eventually Australia. At the same time, I became a professional performer of all sorts, so a professional dancer and character actor. So I got to work in a lot of different music festivals, got to travel all over the world and do music festivals, which was really amazing, and some interactive theater shows. I moved to LA and lived there for 5 years doing all sorts of different kinds of things. Some of it was corporate, some of it was for theater, some of it was for all sorts of other quirky things. So, and the reason I wanted to pursue that world is to really dive into both into the entertainment industry to kind of learn the ropes, but also what is going on with the immersive world currently and explore those mediums as an actor because one, I enjoy performing, so why not do it while I was young? But also because I knew that I wanted to eventually direct and produce and create this vision that I had started in undergrad. So I had, for my undergraduate thesis, I actually started to create interactive performance pieces where we had, for example, had gone to Balboa Park in San Diego during Earth Day and did these little like interactive street theater types of things where I dressed up like a sea turtle and people had to save me from the net. And so I started experimenting with stuff like this. And then as I dived into what it's like in the professional world, got really good at costume design and makeup and that sort of thing, and built a really beautiful network of amazingly talented actors and dancers and character actors and producers, directors, and tech people and all this. And so that's what I had always kind of kept a toe in the ocean conservation world too, where I had done some coral reef conservation work in Thailand. I had done some in French Polynesia, always with this intention of kind of building off of what I had started in college, and then eventually wanted to create, a bigger and bigger project out of it. And so when the pandemic hit and I lost all of my jobs, I thought, well, maybe this is a good time to go to grad school. And I found this program at Scripps Institution of Oceanography that was very interdisciplinary. So I was like, this is perfect. I can kind of fuse these two things together and leverage this program to take it to the next step because that's exactly what it was meant for. And so I got my master's in marine conservation and biodiversity from Scripps at UCSD. And that's exactly what I did for the program. I produced an immersive show. And so that show was at the Birch Aquarium in San Diego, and it was about how climate change impacts coral reefs. And so we had a whole series of different actors and characters that were corals and fish, parrotfish. We even had a climate change industry, fossil fuel industry type of character that bleached the corals. And then we had what amounts to like a community engagement kind of format, but basically very interactive way of the audience connecting with the corals and helping rebuild the reef. So to answer your question of how does it all link, that was the seed, or I should say that was the sapling that has grown out of what was initially the seed of creating something, and that which has now become what I'm building to be a nonprofit called Resiliency Immersive, whose mission is to connect communities to ocean conservation and climate action through immersive experiences and theatrical storytelling. So that's how it all kind of connects. And then at the same time, I also do climate justice work on the side.
I think everything you just explained that you've done is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I also think it's really interesting doing theater in a way to show people like myself that doesn't have knowledge about climate change and climate action and bringing it into like a theater-esque, because that sounds like something I would want to watch. Which you mentioned your event at the Birch Aquarium. Why do you think immersive experimental learning is so effective in communicating climate issues?
I think it has a lot to do with impact. So in the theater world, we're constantly finding ways to evoke and help bring out emotion or to illustrate stories that are felt in a way that is more memorable because it's not just in your headspace, it's you feel it in your heart space, you feel it emotionally, you feel it throughout your whole body. And I think immersive forms of engagement are really good at this because they can break the mental experience and help shift people's perspective into something a little bit more physical or emotional or sense oriented. So in a way, it's literally shifting your perspective. Very sometimes it can be very literally, like for example, some immersive theater will take you underneath tables or take you through like tunnels or like in Meow Wolf, you'll go through a washing machine. So it's like literally taking you into these different forms and different realities of sorts. And so I think that's important for kind of shaking up our day to day. So, for example, if you go see a movie, and it could be like a really amazing documentary and you can feel really inspired and all this, but at the end of the day, you're still, um, you grab your jacket and you go home. But with something like immersive experiences that really like shakes you to the core and can create these really profound and memorable experiences that you physically remember. Um, you're not just going to take your jacket and remember go home and then forget about it the next day. You're going to think about it, and it might influence you in ways that you can't you wouldn't expect, or in ways that you like subconsciously over time. So I could actually go on forever about the power of immersive theater, but I think ultimately it's a very visceral experiences that shakes your reality quite literally.
Absolutely. Theater is an art form that truly just can change someone's perspective for the rest of their life. Theater also has this insanely unique ability to evoke deep emotional responses. Ali, how does your use of theater raise awareness for the climate crisis and provide healing for both actors and the community?
So one thing that I found that was very successful with this model is that people respond really well when they can see themselves reflected in stories. And so, if you take a coral, for example, a lot of people may or may not know what a coral is. Even if you show them a picture, it's like, what is that? Is that a plant? Is that an animal? Somewhere in between? Who knows? But the more that people start to see their experiences reflected in what the coral is going through, the more they're going to empathize with it. So I think that's the key, is empathy, actually. And so with the show that we did at the aquarium, for example, the we had the corals start out the show with well, first of all, I should say it was a whole immersive experience. So people come, they enter the space, they get to meet the different parrotfish and the corals kind of interacting with people as they're kind of mingling and talking to each other. And then when the theatrical show started, we had projection mapping of actual coral footage that we worked with the science team that was doing coral research at Scripps and so on. So anyway, it was this whole like ocean immersive environment that you're in, and the corals start the story by doing their Polynesian dance, which is very fun and lively, bright colors of fabrics and everything. And then the industrial character comes in and tears off their fabrics to reveal these white bodysuits underneath. And so there's something very visceral about that image of getting literally torn and to reveal that bleaching effect. And because the actor was able to emote in her face this happening, there's something powerful that happens when people see that. So there, they can still feel this empathy when they see like a coral, like an image of a coral reef being bleached. But when they see the human emoting it, there's something that connects people on an emotional level. And I suppose it's anthropomorphizing it in a way that really resonates with people, and that seems to be very effective.
You've mentioned that your climate action play is aimed at millennials. Could you tell us a bit more about why this specific generation?
Sure. So if we wait too long to do the climate action, so something that happens a lot is, oh, the next generation will take care of it. Oh, it'll be the next generation. Like they're smart, they're young, they're motivated, they'll figure it out. The problem is we have a very short window of time in which we have the opportunity to take significant action to protect the stability of climate on our planet. Because the thing with climate change is it's not so much that the change is concerning. Climate change has always been part of the history of the Earth. That's not such a big deal. What is a big deal is the rate of change is so high and so much higher than anything that we've ever seen in the history of our planet that we don't know what's going to happen in terms of how intense things are going to get and how shooken up these cycles are going to get and how that's going to disrupt the relative stability that we've had during the most of our human existence. So, um, remind me where I was going with that.
Why the you're aiming this at millennials, like
Oh,
why
right.
at this generation?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, because we have such a short window of time to protect that stability on the planet, we have to take action as soon as possible. And then actually, really, we should have been doing this 50 years ago, 70 years ago, ideally.
Absolutely.
But, now is the next best time. And so the reason I like to focus on the millennial generation is because they are the ones who are either already in positions of power or are going into positions of power to have that agency and that authority to make those really significant infrastructure changes that we need, both at the policy level and at the business level and so on. The older generations, to some degree, yes, but as we've seen, they seem to be a little bit stuck in their ways. I would say we can include Gen X, since they tend to be forgotten. It depends on if they're interested in this kind of thing. And then, of course, Gen Z too. I think is definitely going to resonate really well with this. But the millennials really are like they are in the positions of like Congress and all of that. They're going into those positions, if not already. So I think that's the primary reason to reach out. And same with Gen Z. If we were to wait, for example, for the youngest, and because of this format that we have with resiliency is very like um, big and has lots of costumes and everything, people always say, oh my gosh, this is perfect for children. And yes, it is. Children really do respond really well to it. However, I wouldn't want to focus only on children because of exactly this issue of that. If we wait for them to figure it out, it's too late. It'll be too late. It it it's already a little bit too late for all of us. So we do the best that we can now with the time that we have.
That's awesome. I like have truly never even thought about it as thinking about it from the perspective of the generation that's going into the power, like the positions of power, should be the one that we're really trying to focus on. I've always kind of thought, oh, obviously we should try to influence all generations, but like you said, there's wishful thinking out there for that kind of push. But I think it's amazing because I've always thought of it as like, oh, Gen Z will be like the one to like really change the way because I've noticed a very strong attachment to the environment with people that are in Gen Z, like myself, my friends, my people in my major, what have you. But yeah, focusing on millennials is a really good idea because it's going to make the change happen now because they are the ones who have the ability to make the change. Now we're going to pivot slightly. We're aware that you have an Indigenous background. Indigenous knowledge has always been integral to understanding and responding to environmental issues, especially here at Cal State San Marcos. We have a very deep rooted history with Indigenous knowledge. How do you incorporate Indigenous perspectives into your storytelling and into your performances?
Oh, yay. I love this question. So, yeah, growing up, we are Puro, which the indigenous word is actually Atsihem, which is the last remaining word of the language. Puro is actually the Spanish word for the indigenous group that was central to New Mexico. So my family are one of the last remaining descendants of the Atsihem. We have basically been assimilated and kind of over time just sort of disconnected, and people have moved on and moved to other places and so on. So we don't have a centralized tribe of sorts. We're not a federally recognized tribe. So what we have are literally the stories and the remaining memories that was passed down from my great grandmother to my grandmother to my mother to me and then to the generations continued on. So this means that it's very special, all of all of those memories and all of that knowledge that we have been able to retain despite everything that has happened and despite the attempted genocide of all of the indigenous peoples here. And so I think the best way to answer this question is that something I don't really have to think about. The indigenous way is just something that I grew up with, and so it just makes sense. And then it wasn't until much later that I started to realize that, oh, I guess that you could consider that to be like an indigenous perspective, but in reality it was really just, well, why wouldn't you think of yourself as one with the environment, as in harmony with, as everything that you do is in consideration of how everything is holistically working together, as opposed to in domination over, or as our current paradigm is based and rooted in extraction of domination over. And so in my storytelling, I suppose, some of that just kind of comes out naturally. And then in thinking through how we can use resiliency going forward, I would love to continue to use it as a platform to help uplift those voices that have historically been left out or excluded or never had a voice. And this includes both human and non-human. So I guess to give an example for the Birch Aquarium event again, the choral characters worked very closely with a couple different Polynesian groups to kind of integrate the Polynesian perspectives and knowledge into those characters and into the performances. And so we wanted them to have like a global representation of reefs, since reefs are all over the world and they require global action because climate change is their biggest threats, and climate change requires a global collective action. And so the chorals danced to a Tahitian song, and so we had them do a Tahitian dance. And then we also opened the space. We opened the whole experience with a traditional Hawaiian chant from the Kumolipo. And so I was very lucky and very fortunate to work with this beautiful Hawaiian elder who was able to provide that chant. And it was honoring the coral reef ancestors, understanding that the corals have come first because they are millions and millions of years old. And so they are our original ancestors. So that is one way to kind of integrate the indigenous knowledge and perspective. And then going forward, yes, the stories that we'll tell, I would love to continue to weave in not just the knowledge, but also the stewardship, and advocate for how can we help help generate positions for Indigenous stewards and leaders. And I think this is something that we've seen some successes with, like the Chumash Marine National Sanctuary being led by the Chumash is a beautiful example of what can happen when there is Indigenous leadership. And so that is one route of advocacy that I would really like to focus on, is making sure that there is that avenue for Indigenous leadership, not just drawing from the knowledge, but actually creating space for people to help unmess up the world.
That's nice. And I feel like very inclusive, and even like you said, people that don't have a voice, if they were to experience that, I feel like they would feel more involved for sure. Now, given the overwhelming nature of the climate crisis, we'd love to know how you cope with climate anxiety and uncertainty. How do you think performance art can help others manage those emotions?
The first thing that comes to mind is somatic integration. So somatic being in your body. So one thing that I think our culture has gotten very accustomed to is seeing everything, experiencing everything through a screen, or through sitting all day working on a job, at a desk job, or watching TV forever, looking down at your phones, and there's not a whole lot of movement. And so I think being able to integrate more movement into our daily lives and daily practices is really key to help move that anxiety out of you, so it doesn't stay stuck in your body or stuck in your head or wherever it may live, but actually gets gets moved. And so things like dancing, going to music festivals is a great way to release a lot of that pent up anxiety. And I think that's part of the reason why they're so successful is because people need that outlet and they don't even need to explain it. It just, they go to it, they feel that catharsis, as it would be in theater language, that release. And so, and I think things like yoga or sports in general, or just running, whatever it may be, is really important to continue on a daily basis so that we don't get so stuck and so caught up in the potential despair and hopelessness that we are bombarded with every day.
That's so amazing. The work that you're doing bridges performance art and, of course, climate action. And it's something that we've never really seen before, or at least I've never seen anything before. And Alex, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like
I
that.
have not. I'm like mesmerized.
Yeah, it's so cool. And your experiences in life from being in a professional circus and being a professional clown, and then coming from New Mexico where they only had one marine conservation teacher, and coming to University of San Diego and double majoring, and everything in between has just been so inspiring to myself and hopefully to our listeners. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the podcast. However, we want to introduce you to a tradition that we do here at Climate to Action. We offer our listeners a chance to implement something into their own lives that helps combat climate change in some small ways. In other words, we call this our call to action.
Ali, throughout your work, you've emphasized the importance of collaboration and justice. What is one thing our listeners can do to contribute to climate action in their own lives today?
There's so many to choose from. Let's see. I think one of the most impactful things that we can do is stay engaged in a collective action kind of way. And so that can be different things to different people. So that could mean participating in a rally like we saw this past weekend. It could mean showing up to your local policymakers' meetings and giving a public comment. It could mean lobbying with your local policymakers about a particular legislation that you support or oppose, or maybe even suggesting some kind of legislation that isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very least, even if you don't get involved with policy, stay positive and encourage the people closest to you, your friends and family, to never forget that our planet, our Earth, is such a gem of a planet, and that if we it up here, there's no going back. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's important to maintain that perspective. And so if anything, the call to action would be to remember that we are part of, one with our overall planet, and we are not, again, in dominion over it. And there's one more thing I would love to add, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So the other part of my life I didn't really get into so much is in the climate justice space, but I am the climate justice policy coordinator for Climate Action Campaign, which is a local nonprofit here
Oh
in
my
San
gosh.
Diego.
Oh, nice.
So this is my full-time day job. And then I'm building up resiliency immersive as like as we do, going through the ups and downs of figuring out how to do what is the best way to do that as a nonprofit or whatnot. But the work at Climate Action Campaign has given me a really fantastic insight into the policy landscape and how to most effectively make those changes at the local level, which then have those cascading effects outward. And so I think from that perspective, I would also say that um, it's important to stay engaged and not bury our head under the sand despite how difficult it is, and keeping in tune with these sorts of nonprofits that are doing this kind of advocacy work or are doing the really boots on the ground types of work can be really effective too, because they can help guide, okay, this event is happening, or this project is happening, and this is how you can get involved.
That is some beautiful and super powerful advice. Ali, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. We've learned a lot about how creativity, policy, and community engagement can intersect to drive meaningful climate action.
It's been incredible hearing about the work you're doing, and we encourage everyone listening to check out the resources Ali mentioned and take action in their own lives.
Want to hear more from Climate to Action, a CSUSM student podcast? Be sure to check us out wherever you get podcasts and follow us on our socials at Climate to Action.
That's at Climate to Action on Instagram and at Climate to Action on TikTok. We'll be posting updates, behind the scenes content, and more.
Remember, it's never too late to start making a difference in the climate crisis. Keep learning, keep acting, and keep pushing for change.
Until next time, this is Climate to Action signing off.